Okay, students, a very good afternoon to all the students present here today. Today we shall revise this chapter, Landscape of the Soul, that has been written by Nathalie Trouveroy. We've already done it. We'll just revise this chapter today. Now, as you know that this chapter is divided into three parts. And the first part, it deals the first narrative. If we just talk about the first narrative, it is about a medieval Chinese artist named Wu Daozi. So, can anyone tell me what do you know about Wu Daozi and his painting and all? Who will elaborate about Wu Daozi? Wu Daozi was a famous medieval Chinese artist. What do you know about Wu Daozi? Because it's the revision of the chapter, so it's not that I would be telling each and everything. You have to respond also and you have to participate in the discussion. What kind of a landscape had he painted? Where did he work? What happened to him? And how that story became a part of Chinese legend and a part of rich folklore of China. Elaborate. It is not that I would be explaining each and everything again. If it's a revision of the chapter, then what does it mean? You need to participate, you need to respond. Yes, yes, Kiran.
The landscape by the Tang Emperor Xuanzong. To decorate a palace wall, the artist concealed his work behind a screen so that only the emperor would see it. For a long time, the emperor admired the wonderful scene.
Yes. So she said that Wu Daozi was a painter under the emperor, Tang Emperor Zhuangzong, who had asked him to paint a landscape in order to decorate his palace wall. And he had hidden his painting behind a screen, and only the Tang Emperor could see it. And when the emperor came in, he admired the landscape. Landscape was a beautiful one with the forests, it presented a wonderful scene with mountains, with waterfalls, with clouds, and with people who were living harmoniously, in a radiant kind of an environment. So this was the landscape that was painted by Wu Daozi. And then what happened? What happened after that? What else did he show him apart from this? What did he tell him about the cave? What did Wu Daozi tell him about the cave? Yes? Yes, Tushita. Tushita. Tushita.
The spirit lived in the cave which was at the foot of the mountain. As he clapped his hands, the entrance of the cave opened. He told the emperor that the inside of the cave was splendid and offered to show his majesty the way.
Yes. So he told him that at the foot of the mountain there lived a spirit. And what did the painter do? He just clapped his hands, and the moment he clapped his hands, the entrance to the cave opened. And inside the cave, he said it is inside is grand inside, and it is splendid, and he could not express it in words. And he told the emperor that he would show him the way. And the moment the painter entered the cave, the entrance closed behind him, and the emperor could not understand what had happened, and before he could utter a single word, the painting along with the painter had vanished. So these kinds of stories, they, as I told you, these are a part of Chinese legend, and they are part of rich folklore of China. And here in this chapter we have to differentiate between Chinese painting and European paintings. And the author wants to stress upon this point that Chinese paintings are abstract in nature because they cannot be defined, and they have to be felt, and they have to be experienced, by the onlooker. And whereas the European paintings, we'll discuss about them also in part 2. The author talks about another painter who believed in spiritual magic of art, and he had painted a magnanimous dragon. So what happened? Why did he not paint the eye of that dragon? Can anyone just elaborate? The second part of the chapter, the narrative deals with another painter who had painted a dragon. Uh, who said this, may I? Rashan. Yes, you can hold on for just 2 seconds and then you can respond.
Painter feared that if he drew the eye of the dragon he had painted, the picture would be complete and the dragon might come alive. Then it might fly out of the painting.
Yes, very good. So he had such a strong belief in his art, and it was such that he was frightened by the probability of bringing his arts to life. So he felt that his art would come to life, and he would fall a victim to a fiery dragon, because if you would paint the eye of that dragon, the dragon is going to come out of that painting, and maybe it would attack him or something like that. And then part 3, the writer cites a story which is representative of Europe during the 15th century in Antwerp, Belgium. And what is that story? What is that story that we talk about? Belgium, the European story. We're talking about a place, Antwerp, that is in Belgium, and there's a famous story about that. What is that story about? Master blacksmith called Quentin Matsys. Shita.
Painter's daughter, the father would not give his consent because he was not a painter. The blacksmith enters the painter's studio and painted a fly on his latest panel with such realism that the painter almost batted away before he realized what had happened. The painter then got his daughter married to him.
Yes, very good. So the story is which is representative of Europe in 15th century, during the 15th century, Antwerp, Belgium. In this, we talk about Quentin Matsys, who was a master blacksmith, and he fell in love with the daughter of a famous painter. But the painter would not agree to such a match because he did not like the profession of that, Quentin Matsys. So therefore, he refused that alliance. And then one day, the blacksmith, he just sneaked into the painter's studio, and what did he paint? He painted a fly, and that fly had such a moderate realism that it resembled a real one. And even that painter, the master painter, could not understand. And before he actually tried to swat away that fly, and he could not understand before he realized what had happened. And therefore he was so much impressed by Quentin Matsys that he not only took him as an apprentice, but he also got him married to his daughter. So here we are talking about these two different stories. The stories related to China and Chinese art and the European art. These stories illustrate the different forms of art in two different regions. So what is it that the Chinese artists want to convey? They want to convey a deep purpose, and they want to convey a deep emotion, and they give a sense of vitality. Whereas, what do the Europeans do? The Europeans, they're concerned about only external appearance, and they want to create and they want to achieve a perfect illusionistic likeness. Okay, so this is the difference between the two. And the Chinese paintings, they're based on the philosophy of Taoism. And what is that philosophy? This philosophy says that life has no meaning unless we undertake the inner spiritual journey. So life has its meaning only if we undertake spiritual journey. This is what is the basis of Chinese painting. Can anyone just elaborate about the concept of shan shui, which is mountain, water, and all? What is shan shui? Yes, Dia. Dia, you can, but you have to wait for a few seconds. Then
Shanshui is a Chinese word which means yang yin. That means mountain water. These two words represent the Taoist view of the universe. The mountain is yang. It reaches vertically towards heaven. It is stable, warm and dry in the sun. This water is yin. It
It is a fluid, moist and cool. It resets horizontally on the earth.
Yes. So this is the fundamental notion of. Okay, just a minute.
So this is the fundamental notion of Taoism, and this is expressed as Shanshui, which means mountain water. And these are two complementary poles, two elements, and they are complementary poles. And this is the Taoist view of the universe. And as she has just expressed, mountain is Yang, which is vertical, and it moves vertically towards heaven. It is warm and stable and dry, whereas water is the second part, is yin, which is horizontal and which is moist, fluid, and cool. And the interaction is the fundamental notion of Taoism, the interaction of yang and yin. And we had talked about one thing else also, and that was the middle void. What is that a middle void, and where that interaction takes place? What can it be compared to? What is the middle void compared to? Anyone who can just elaborate the comparison of the middle void to something.
The middle part is called the middle void, which is being compared to pranayama. It is the place where meditation takes place, the breathing in, its retention, and the breathing in.
Yes.
It is very important.
Yes, it's important, and it is often, but the author says it is often overlooked, but it is the most important part. The the retaining of breath. In pranayam, you breathe in, you breathe out, but also you retain your breath. The suspension of breath is very important, and it is that middle void where the meditation takes place, and it is important because, and the author says, nothing can happen without it. Therefore, he's compared it to the unpainted space in Chinese landscape, which also represents the it is Chinese painting, as we have discussed. It also talks about, and it is also based on the philosophy of Taoism. Okay, so then the next part of this chapter, it is about outside art, and as we had discussed, we can also call it as art root. It is the art by the gifted individuals who have not acquired or who do not require any kind of formal training, but yet they are very comfortable and they can use unconventional methods of art. So and the greatest example which we have here in this chapter is of Nechand, who was a genius, who had a viewpoint, who had a view of his own, and he had a viewpoint to think above and beyond his contemporaries, and that is why he made this wonder, the rock garden as we all know it today. Okay, so this is about art root, and which is also known as outside the art of the outsider art, or you can also say call it as art root. Okay, so it is of the ones who think outside the box. It is of the ones who defy the normal standards, and it can also be called as unorthodox art. Okay, so this is about this chapter, and if there's anything that you have not followed in this chapter, you can ask me, and if there's any question that you want me to discuss, that also we can discuss. And Nechand is also known as untutored genius because he did not get any formal training for that. Okay, but he had a vision, he had a viewpoint which was much above and beyond his contemporaries. So he's considered as India's biggest contributor to outsider art. And how was his work acknowledged? Can anyone just tell me? How was Nechand's work acknowledged? What did a particular magazine, I'm giving you a hint, a particular UK based magazine, what did it do for him? UK based magazine, Raw Vision, what did it do? What did it feature? Because this chapter has already been done in detail in the class, and I'd sent you videos also, recording, so many things I've already sent you. Still, you people are sitting so passively here, except for just Kiran, Dushita, and Dia, and a few more students. What about the others? Bolo? Featured Nechand and also his rock garden sculpture "Women by the Waterfall" on its anniversary's issue cover. It was the 50th issue of the magazine, and known by the name of Spring 2005. Okay, so these particular artists, they have artistic insights, they have they are innovative, they are creative, but they have not got any formal uh, training in art as such. And but according to Nature, what is his biggest reward? The biggest reward, according to him, is walking through the garden and seeing people enjoy his creation. So for him, that is the biggest reward. Okay. If you have not followed any of the questions that were given to you as a part of your assignment, we can discuss. But you people were supposed to send me your assignment by yesterday. So those who have not yet submitted the work, I will be sending the reports today evening. Please do it as soon as possible.